perhaps one of the most extraordinary features of this story is the failure of those in charge to take action to recover their money and to commence criminal proceedings. And we see this, we've seen this in another affair which is currently before the Parliament. But what I wanted to ask you now is, you did interviews, you were meticulous, you gathered all the evidence you could, and as I understand it, you submitted this to the legal advisors, the solicitors for Fairfax. It was cleared by them, and it was cleared by your producers, your editors, as it were. Everybody was ready. It was well promoted, if I recall correctly, yet for some reason we never heard it. Now, why is that?
Yes, you are correct, Professor. After the Craig Thompson interview and then subsequent interviews with various interested parties in relation to Craig Thompson and the HSU, this matter was brought to my attention, and I made my inquiries, broadcast a few reports of statements that had been made with the protection of parliamentary privilege in the Victorian Parliament. Later in that week, on the Thursday or the Friday, on the Friday I was introduced to Robert Kernahan, the former president of the union, and I interviewed him on a Friday night, pre-recorded it, sent it to our legal representatives, and the assertions in that initial interview were pretty powerful and required a hell of a lot of substantiation. Keep in mind though that Kernahan was a respondent in the legal proceedings and had all the documents served on him, had them all, they're all there. So I could get them from him, which I did. And as a result of what I saw, reframed the interview with him, and as a result of the legal advice I had received from Fairfax's external defamation lawyers, re-recorded the interview on a Saturday with Kernahan, had it legaled. It went through the ordinary course of legal approvals and legal guidance that I would apply to any contentious, controversial matter of this nature. And I brought to bear the same faculties as I would to any other story. Keep in mind, I had never been once sued for defamation. I'd been on the radio at that stage, I think, about 4 years. Had never once had a successful complaint to the Communications or Media Authority brought against me, notwithstanding the best efforts of the Mohammedan folk who took issue with my comments about the burqa or their prophets' paedophilia. None of those complaints were successfully brought against me. I was aware of the environment in which we live, a litigious environment. I was aware of Ms Gillard's antipathy towards this story. So we were careful and prudent. And after my bosses had received the legal approval, they, independent of me, prepared the promotions for what was clearly a big story. And a big story on the back of the Craig Thompson story, which my interview elicited, in which my interview with him elicited the admissions that he in fact had authorised the payments of the brothel bills. So those promotions were produced independently of me, authorised independently of me. They went to air over that weekend, and on the Monday, the Australian ran a column authored by Glen Milne. A senior executive with News Limited phoned me on the Monday morning asking what I had that would go to substantiate the claims made in the promotions that Fairfax was then running. And I explained to him what I had, and we had a certain conversation in which he relayed conversations that the Prime Minister had had with the CEO of News at that time. And he told me that they were considering withdrawing Milne's column and apologising to the Prime Minister, which I thought was amazing, just gobsmacking. I asked, what were you withdrawing? What bothered you about Milne's column? What is an assertion in it that was untrue? The particular fellow at News Limited was unable to say other than that it had upset the Prime Minister. And the rest is history. The rest is you observed fact as to what happened. News Limited withdrew Milne's column, apologised unequivocally for any assertion, any and all assertion in it. It was a very broad apology. But we continued to promote the fact of this interview going ahead until about 10 to 12 on that day. I received a phone call from management in Fairfax in Melbourne to tell me that it was not to be broadcast. And then there was all sorts of argy-bargy over the next week or so, and I was suspended. Now, I have an agreement with Fairfax that sets out the terms under which I left the company. I resigned from the company. And the reason for me resigning from Fairfax is the agreed statement says editorial differences. And I have agreed that that's what I'll say as to the reason I left, is over editorial differences to do with this story. I wanted very much to broadcast the interview with Bob Kernahan, to give him the voice. I wanted that very much. I think that's clear, that's on the record. Fairfax wanted very much for me not to do that. And the rest is, you know, history. Now, you draw whatever inference you wish. You're a sentient being, as is each of the people listening to this. You'll draw whatever, you know, I was there, I know what happened. Likewise, the Fairfax people. It cost both Fairfax and me a hell of a lot of money in legal proceedings subsequent from Fairfax's actions in suspending me and what have you. Now, let me put all of that to one side, because I make no disparaging statement at all about Fairfax. I do want to talk, though, about an environment in democratic Australia where a Prime Minister, for the purpose of protecting her own personal interest, with no possible claim to a higher purpose, with no even leaning towards, no statement, no implication that this is for a national interest or for some more noble purpose. There's nothing like that. It is purely and simply to enhance or protect her own interest in having a story that involves her not told, where that Prime Minister is able to bring to bear either directly, as is the case with News Limited, and I say that on the basis of public statements made by John Hartigan, the former CEO of News Limited. He made the statements publicly. So it's directly brought to bear by that Prime Minister on News Limited, and they folded. Or indirectly, which is the best knowledge that I have in relation to Fairfax, and that is that the environment, the febrile environment created by her, was such that management, not legal people, but management in Fairfax made the decisions that they or he made, that we live in a place where a Prime Minister can cause the end of the career of Milne or me on the radio. To what end? Well, to protect a personal interest that she has. We tie ourselves up in hoops over some apprehended concern that Gina Rinehart might want to own a media company. We tie ourselves up in hoops that coal interests or whatever, may have statements to make about climate change, and that may be odious to some people. But where is the outrage that the Prime Minister can use all of those artefacts of her office, or all of the people that she has in her office, for that sort of purpose? This is not conjecture as to whether it happened. It happened. It happened in contemporary Australia. And it's bloody disgraceful that nowhere else is she held to account. Let me say this to you unequivocally. This matter was not withdrawn because of it infringing on any known defamation law. Now, I appreciate this may be a fine commercial judgment, but that is not the basis on which my story was withdrawn, because it did not. It did not. Every assertion made in it was defensible on the basis of fact, it being factual and manifestly, I would suggest, in the public interest that it be broadcast, and that interest particularly pertaining to the financial interest the members of that union have in their money and the purpose to which it was put. Now, I find it just so damned unsettling that a Prime Minister could act in that way with the acquiescence of the bulk of the nation's media and with the demonising of anybody who swam contrary to that flow. In other words, anybody in the media who said, hang on a sec, this Prime Minister, bang, the bloody ton of bricks is down on him. And you have urges for her pointing to a statement by her as bland as this, I did nothing wrong, it's all on the public record, and holding that up as if it's some sort of received wisdom that completely and absolutely has the standing of some sort of judicial determination, that this has been tested and she has been found to have no case. In fact, the whole matter has been put to bed. It's ancient history. It is not ancient history. And I think this is a disgraceful chapter in Australia's media, and a disgraceful and disquieting chapter for all of us in having confidence that the truth will be told and that truth is the overriding consideration.